This algorithm, what we're talking about here, this algorithm was not applied here. Maybe something else was, we haven't detected it, but it's clear that Trump was doing better among Democrat precincts.
The other point, Shiva, is you could see that you could establish some real upper and lower control limits here,
Yep.
because there is the presence of a line, but with the other ones, it's going straight down. There's no such thing as an upper and lower control limit.
Right. So, I mean, it's almost like we call it a transistor function, right? At a certain point, you cut off,
Yeah.
And transistors go straight down, but this is this kind of, from an engineering standpoint, it's a ramp function. But anyway, not to get too technical, but the point is, Wayne County, we don't see this algorithm in place. So we say, quote unquote, no cheating, no algorithm applied. So that's the data. So what do the results show? Let's conclude on the results. Well, the algorithm that's there moves Trump votes to Biden. That's what it's doing. And I don't think anyone will argue with it, because we've seen Trump votes moving to Biden. The second thing is that as precincts increase with a higher percentage of Republicans, greater percentage of Trump votes are transferred to Biden. So you would think, wow, more people are Republicans in this precinct. You would think Trump would do better. In fact, it seems like going to Republican precincts was his worst nightmare. You lose more, he lost higher percentage of votes, the more Republican precincts they were. Another way to think about this is the more the precinct was Republican, the more percent of Trump votes are transferred to Biden in that precinct. I'll repeat that. The more the precinct was Republican, the more the percent of Trump votes are transferred to Biden. And by case in point, let's just go look back here at Kent County. This very dramatic graph here. So very Republican. This is almost like 90% Republican. Trump got nearly 25% votes lost there, e.g. transferred to Biden. Okay? That's what we're looking at here. So this is just looking at the data. So the slope of the discount to Trump's votes is the same for each county. That's what's more interesting. What do I mean by that? What is the slope? Again, people, if you have forgotten algebra, right? Y equals mx, this slope, this line. This is a little bit steeper, but by and large, the slope is pretty much the same. Okay? So the slope of that line looks very similar. And that's what we want to make it. The slope of the discount to Trump's votes is reasonably, quote unquote, I should put the same for each county. Now, Wayne County, the result had no algorithm we detected, right? That was just flat. And that was very much like the work that Phil did here in Massachusetts, where we looked at Franklin County. It was all hand counted. Remember that, Phil? It was all flat. We didn't see any changes. Okay? So what's the discussion? So those are the results. Let's have a discussion here. So the algorithm, we believe, is a weighted race allocation method. It's a transfer of a percent of votes from one candidate to another. As we discussed, the percent is a weighted decimal value, and we can calculate it as we get more data. But clearly, the weighted race method, and one of the things is a weighted race, as we mentioned at the outset, is a documented feature in election systems as early as 2001. And all major vendors, we had a discussion about that, right? But it's not just Dominion, it's all of them are believed to have this feature. Diebold, as we showed in 2001, had, maybe it was earlier, but Bev Harris's work uncovered it was originally in the Diebold systems. Am I missing anything there, Benny?
No, that the breakup of the election industry started with Diebold. So all of the software that the other vendors probably would have used, the source code would have originated from the Diebold.
Right. Yeah, right. So there we go. So let's go back. So what we see here, so that's a discussion. The other piece of this discussion is this. Why are more percent of Trump votes? So we want to ask some questions. In science, in engineering, we have to actually solve a problem. So you have to get down to the heart of the real problem, right? We're not politicians here. Phil's an engineer. I'm an engineer. Benny's an engineer. We all program software. We can't BS our way out of talking our way out of stuff. Our software doesn't work. Something's wrong. So we always have to ask some profound questions to find the heart of the issue. So one question is, why are more percent of Trump votes transferred to Biden in precincts that have more Republicans? It's an interesting question. Second question is this, are both Republicans and Democrats involved in supporting this algorithm? Interesting question, because you have Republican precincts and in Democrat precincts, the algorithm is not on. So what's going on? Are both parties involved? So And the other question we probably need to ask, and again, this is more research, are both parties aware of such features in these voting systems? We're hearing now news, there's lawsuits against Dominion, right? That's happening, others, but, are both parties aware of these features? Another question is it possible that this pattern is normal and explains a normal voting pattern? What do we mean by this pattern? We're talking about that line going, just to be clear, we're talking about that line going across and then coming down at a certain point, that pattern. Line going across and coming down. So is it possible that's just normal? Well, that just happens. This is not no algorithm, you guys are trying to say, but is it possible that's normal? And we had a big discussion among our team on this because we really wanted to, again, provide everyone, because we think this is a very important issue for the entire country, for that matter, those people who have suffrage now in the world and we're relying on these technology systems. Maybe is this just normal? Well, and in fact, for example, Mitt Romney would say, and he has said this, the pattern makes sense. He would say, look, since Republicans stayed Republican, but no longer like Trump, this could be true, right? This could be true. However, if that's the case of what Mitt Romney says, look, Republicans broadly are still Republicans, but there's a percentage of them, across the board who just don't like Trump, right? They just don't like him. Trump lost votes, and that's just the way it is, okay? Well, if that were true, what would you see? You would see this.
Right.
You would see all these precincts deviating from the norm, at some distribution like this, all right? But that's not what we see, right? But that's not what we see. What we see is a predictable line, a decline of dislike for Trump with increasing percentage of Republican precincts. We actually see this. We don't see this. If Mitt Romney was right, you would see this. Or if any rational person would write, oh yeah, Trump just pissed off a lot of Republicans everywhere. Well, across all precincts you'd see this, everywhere. But what we see is this. In fact, we see a beautiful line, which you could go back to your Algebra 1 class and write an equation for, y equals mx plus b, and I could draw that line. I could calculate it precisely. So precisely, I could put it into a computer program. That's how precisely I could do this. And I'm sure we could do this in any function, probably in 5-10 minutes. We haven't gotten there yet. Any software engineer listening can do this. So just to be clear, Mitt, if you're listening, if what you were saying, Mitt, that would sure be like this, but the reality is like this. And I think Mitt would probably find this a little more, I would be illuminated if he could answer this in some normal means. So given that this predictable linear decline of dislike increases, it makes no sense, right? This makes no sense unless a computer algorithm was in place to lower Trump's votes as a function of percentage of Republicans in a precinct. In this case, linearly, okay? That curve, boom, it goes down beautifully linear. So let me just bring that back to everyone, and I'll ask Phil and Ben if you want to add, and we still have some other stuff to finish, but what we're saying is that beautiful point where it's nice and flat, Trump's actually doing well in non-Republican precincts, and then it's like a switch gets turned on and it goes down linearly. Our position is that could only be done by a computer algorithm in such a precise way over so many precincts, okay? It's not like, because over so many precincts, you'd see some random fluctuations. You don't. You see a nice little line going there. Phil and Benny, do you want to add anything to that discussion point?
Phil's the man.
Phil?
You said it pretty well. The main thing is, Benny, I greatly respect the work you've done. And is there any doubt in your mind, what percentage chance is it that what we're seeing is not a computer algorithm?
Let me just ask that for everyone's audience, because Phil's on phone here, because he's got, what Phil asked Benny is, what is the chance that pattern, let me go back there, the pattern that we're talking about is just not a computer algorithm. That was the question Phil asked you, Benny.
Yeah, I rarely would say 0%, so I maybe say 1%. If you get in trouble, if you don't leave a little room for error, it's just not something you would see again. The engineering is reversing the organization of the precincts, and as they grow in size, at some point you're supposed to strike an average. So that means if we got to precincts, if they were continuing to increase, if we had 100% turnout, then that number would just grow further in the size, and that line and that slope would continue to go down. And that is literally the presence of something that is not, it's barely germane to something that's natural. It's something that's artificial.